Good afternoon, good morning, good evening. A warm welcome to you from whichever part of the world you're joining us from. This is the 360-degree brand story hosted by Akiko Stories. And in this space, we talk about brands coming alive, staying alive, thriving alive, and just being alive. Keyword, alive. I am Joe Mukoko, your host for the show. When we were younger and we were told it was story time, we would get excited and get our cups of tea or bowls or whatever snack you are taking so that you could just sit and soak in the wisdom. What no one told us then is that we were storytellers. We were authors and narrators of not only our own lives, but our daily experiences. How does that translate in the business space? That is why the 360-degree brand story exists, to help you be able to overcome some of the biases and to pull, attract, draw, and retain those crowds that are your target customers. As I said, I am Joe Mukoko, host of the show, and this afternoon I'm joined by my co-founder, and it's not a hot seat. Today we've said we are not discussing hot seats, so it's not a hot seat. It's a cool, calm, reflective place. Chesubire Craig. And before we start the show, there's always a twist to us working together. And please feel welcome. Take a pen, take a paper, jot down whatever it is we shall be discussing. Chesubire, you've been in this space for quite some time, talking, speaking, marketing, creating. Oh, yes, and she's also part of the Design Society of Kenya, designing things. Maybe we should give you work to sit in the planning committees of town so that they can be serious with what they're doing. Story for another day. That's why storytelling is good. Is there a moment in your life when you communicated with a customer and according to you, you had said, you knew you had communicated to them, but later on, they had grasped different things from the communication that you had sent out to them? Their perception was very different from what you had communicated.
Yes.
How was that?
So it's when I was in the event industry, and so at that point, event management was just new. It was budding. It was rising. It was very helpful to people, and I'd done a friend's wedding, and then they referred me to a friend of theirs who was getting married. And that particular friend was not being nice. So I had done a lot of it for free because of my friend was my colleague at the time. So we had discounted and offset a lot of things. And this person wanted the same level of treatment, but she was different. My previous bride would sit down, she would figure out colors. Every conversation was a settled conversation. With this particular potential client, every conversation was a restart of the previous. So we meet today, we discuss colors and a theme, and we build a budget. We're meeting on Thursday, and she has a different set of colors, a different theme, but her budget is static. Okay. So what eventually happened is we did the budget, and she says, "Oh, our budget is X 100,000 shillings." I'm like, "That's so little." And then she says, "And you're only charging your event management fee on the price on the supplies you're bringing in." I said, "No. Event management fee is on the global budget, the total budget." So we had a back and forth. And then she said, "And us guys are only willing to pay you X." I said, my personal percentage. So they were offering 10%. and my personal percentage was 16%. And I'll give context. Imagine you have a budget, 400,000 shillings. The wedding is in December. This is February. They want to pay you 10%. That is 40,000 shillings for the year. She wants me to take her on tastings, every fitting she wants. We go for want to set up floral setups for decor set. So I said no. And I'd given her all these ideas. And so she says, but this is the price my fiance has set. And I said to her, two things. One, we don't work together. Two, you negotiate with him because you know the value I bring to the table. Eventually, she went dark. I got ghost. Nowadays, they call it ghosting. Then she just went dark. But what was most interesting, so we had this conversation in March. When my friend asked her, she gave some lame story. So my friend is like, Shasubira is not like that. So she called me. I'm like, your pal, your friends, let me leave you guys to be friends. Nisi, let me not enter inside there. Nisiinge hapo ndani. But on the week of her wedding in December, she calls me and says, how do we execute that? It was my concept she was working to execute. And there was one part of it that was not working because they could not find the supply. So I said, I usually get those elements from this place. They don't have it. And she went on a rant. I said, excuse me, I don't know where you can get it. You are refusing to help me. I said, first of all, when is the wedding? You can't even say that, my friend, she went off. I said, I'm sorry. Number one, if you sent the invite on email, I'm sorry I missed it. Secondly, that is the shop you've gone to is where I normally buy from. And no, I will not look for it for you. What she had assumed is just because we're not working together, I will continue to sort her issues. No, no. And I know there's some people who don't understand that stance. But when you position yourself as the problem solver who doesn't get paid, and which is what I had done, so fault was mine, then people learn to take advantage of you. Back to you, Joe.
I like that. You need to position yourself as a service provider who gets paid.
Mm-hmm.
What I'm getting is that there's a strong link between brand perception and pricing power.
Yes, very strong.
How does that work?
So I'll continue with that story. At the point in the industry, I was known as whatever budget you bring Chesubire, you will have a fantastic wedding. My niche, my strength was in executing excellent, beautiful events on a budget. All right. So people knew a couple of things. If you give Chesubire the work, no stress. If you give her the budget, she'll figure it out. But what some of them did not understand is that for me to do that, you must give me artistic license. So we'll talk about everything you want, and then we'll figure out what's possible, still achieve your look and feel on your budget. So I was known for budget events. Now, budget events have got very small margins. So we don't have much room for negotiation and wobbling. But I remember talking to a friend of mine last year who knew me from those days, and she said to me, when you shut down that business, you lost your brand. Because if I had stayed there long enough, because I closed that business eventually, I got tired. If I had stayed there long enough, I would have had the capacity to maintain a budget line and also build a luxe line. But you see, in every space people came into, they knew that you would get excellence, you would get peace of mind, efficiency. I even have had people come back to me. There's a wedding I did in the early 2000s. In 20, 21, she came back to me to execute her mother-in-law's 70th birthday. Again, because she knew there was a story that had been told by how we delivered on our services. So the thing about storytelling, and this is a conversation we have with you all the time, it's not just your marketing thingy. It's how you show up. It's how you speak to people. It's what your socials look like. It's how you execute your work. It's what your product or your service looks like. So it's that's an end-to-end story on the customer side. Then bring in your teams, how your teams treat people, deal with people, all that is a completely different conversation. You see, sometimes what happens is you get known for a certain thing, and when you need to change it, you have to do a shift. So, another event management story. We were doing a local awards event. We had done it several years running, and then we reapplied. It was tender, so we bid it by tender. We came in number 2 because number 1 had a fantastic concept, excellent concept. And they said, you won on execution, they won on concept. Let me tell you, Joe, they delivered rubbish. I can say with confidence. That event was happening and I'm being called. Are you here? I'm like, no. Are you watching? I'm like, why? It's your event. I didn't win the tender. I'm in my house in my PJs, enjoying myself. By the end of that event, and irony is they brought the exact same MC I had used the year before. The year before, he rocked. This year, he bombed spectacularly. They charged 40% more than us. They had a fraction of the decor we could execute. A fraction. So that their bosses walk in, they're like, we're paying these guys more than Nani. And she used to do more than double what they've done. By the end of that meeting, that contract was a 3-year contract. It was cancelled. I got a call the next day from the chair of the committee who asked, would you take up the next 2 years of this contract? I said yes. But I also knew these guys had charged more. So when my quote came in, my quote was higher. And they're like, no, you normally charge us. I said, but you selected somebody who charged us 40% more last year and they did not deliver on the contract. So I think you can pay more. But why were we important to them? Because a couple of years into our contract, we said to them, you are running on a loss. Our initial 2, I think we've done it twice. And they're like, what do you mean? I said, we are running on a loss. What you're charging people isn't even the comprehensive quote for the dinner. And I think in a different conversation, we're talking about how your pricing needs to encompass your direct and indirect costs. So think about an event. You have tents, you have chairs, you have food, but you're only charging enough to cover food. You will have a shortfall. Okay? So what did we do? We went in, we reorganized the cost, we gave them a preliminary cost of what we think they should charge, and then they gave us the responsibility to sell out 700 tickets like the year before. We had just doubled the price. And I had a good sales team. What? We did it. We had 720 people in the room. But you see, at this point, what we have done, we are known for excellence. And we're able now to, over time, comprehensively price for that. So think about a bank. Let me use a local bank. We all know Equity Bank. When Equity Bank was set up, they were set up for the grassroots. They didn't have branches in the major urban centers. They were in the villages. They would take the bank by Land Rover to the people, if I'm not wrong. They set up for farmers. It was basics. But what they did is they took the headache that the farmers had and they simplified it. What was the headache? Think about the tea and the coffee industry. You get paid bulk suddenly. And then you're keeping all this money under your mattress, so your children are stealing, you are robbed. So now they, if I'm not wrong, they partnered with the cooperative societies so that they could now pay the people directly into their bank accounts. So they went into a community that was financially literate but needed skills to manage the finances. So they developed an emotional connection. We understand your pain. They also came and said, this is your consistent challenge. Here's the solution. And then they came to their level. So in many communities, banking was done in local languages. So I could walk into the equity in my village. If I'm Kikuyu, we'll speak in Kikuyu. If I'm Kamba, we'll speak in Kamba. They spoke in the local language. And it started in the central and eastern parts of Kenya. What has happened? They grew because guys are like, how are you doing it? Equity. In fact, the average person calls it equity, not equity. Equity is me and you who are English speakers, right? Equity is the one that has our local accent and dialects tied in. So you see, brand perception, when they came to the urban centers, and I was telling you earlier, I had such an issue with the banking hall. Lines were long, there was no tech. I was used to different systems because I am an urbanite, used to urban banking. But like you adequately said to me, I was not the target market. So then the means in the ecosystem are fewer than the farmers in the rural areas. So they grew, and a lot of the urban banks didn't think that equity was their competition until they showed up and they took up the lower income segment. Because up here, you're charging people 700 shillings a month. I don't know what. This one is pay as you go. So you see, the farmers were having a problem going into some of these bigger banks because of how these global banks looked at this farmer. Boots, a bit scraggly, a bit muddy. I'll give another example. You know the car industry. So then this old man goes in to buy a truck, and the salespeople are like, old man, farmer, no money. So he's walked around the shop for a bit, and then one of the young men, he's a new sales rep, he's just started. He goes, talks to him. They go around this track, that track, this track, that track. Oh. And then he finally settles on a track. And then he says, the young man, I need mama to approve. I will come with her in 2 weeks. Big ones are like, silly boy. You see, you've wasted your money. Sorry, you wasted your time. And all these guys are on commissions, right? So the young man, 2 weeks later, to that day, the old man walks in with an older woman with him with a basket. You know, a kyodo. A kyodo is that, and then it's covered with, those two, the vitambas, the pieces. It's an embroidery cloth. It's pretty, but in this particular setting, it's just out of place. So he walks in and she's carrying a kyodo covered with her nice blue cloth with embroidery. And the other guys are like, silly boy. So he's like, where's my young man? And the young man comes and they talk about it. He shows the truck to mama. They talk about the specs of the truck. And the guy puts a down payment from that kyodo. Guess who gets the commission? This little boy who's been there for less than 3 months. And you see, that's all perception because they looked at this old man, they looked at how he was dressed, they listened to his accent, and they decided from the village, unimportant, doesn't have money. And they went on and they bought multiple tracks and they would refuse to be served by anybody else. So this young man, having overcome the initial brand perception, was able to buy a product. Sorry, to sell a product, and he was able to earn his commission. So that's how brand perception affects pricing. Because you don't expect to pay the same for a actress, Mercedes actress, as you would for Bedford. You wouldn't expect to pay the same. For our younger viewers, Bedford was the track in our day. First of all, the aesthetic of the Mercedes Actros and the Bedford. The power in the engine of the Mercedes Actros, you can tell which one I like. The power in the Mercedes Actros and the Bedford. But you see, I'm buying an Actros if I'm looking to pull or to lift or to transport 40-footer containers. The Bedford is usually for 15, 20 tons. They were usually used around sand, stones. Have you ever seen an Actros in a quarry picking stones to deliver to a construction site? No. And the pricing is different. So the brand perception of the Actros is significantly superior international brand with pulling power. So the same applies to our businesses. How we show up on our socials, in our speech, in our teams, in our packaging if we're delivering physical products, in our look and feel if we're delivering digital products, determines what people think your work is worth. So if we're showing up wonky, careless, messy, pixelated, and then we're charging 1,000,000 shillings, there's some people who will be like, I'm paying 1,000,000 for what? For what? I can get it for cheaper. So that's how brand perception affects pricing.
Thank you very much for that. When you've talked about the actress and the Bedford and the actress in a quarry, I've just tried to play my mind and ask myself, where have I seen an actress carrying just normal goods? Anyway,
Yeah.
thank you so much for that. Emotional connection is important.
Mhm.
If emotional connection is important,
Mhm.
that means we have to keep telling stories. How then can we tell stories that attract profitable customers and strategic partners, even if they are carrying, what did you call it? At your door.
Your door.
Yes.
So let me go back to the equity story. You remember the campaign, Mimi ni member. I remember watching that and I was fascinated about it because we said that equity was targeting the farmers, the bottom of the pyramid, which is where the masses are. So even if you're selling small, your pricing is small, you're doing mass production. It ties into the Kadogo economy, and I'll go there in a bit. So what they were looking to do is to solidify and expand their base. They were looking to increase, and for them, the high value customer was not the one who will pay 1,000,000 shillings, even as they developed a product for that segment. Their high value customer was the masses who would give them consistent income. Their income, of course, is always around loans, around transaction fees. And it had an interesting thing that they encourage you to transact in your mother branch as opposed to going to other branches because they had a lot of people, a lot of traffic. So when you're attracting your specific segment, because high value differs across the segments. For the person doing luxury events, your high value customer is the one who's willing to do full blown destination with all the whistles and bells. So you look at the person who's going to spend 10 million on an event, whereas they would come to social media for proof of concept, their first touch base and their reference to you will not be social media. Social media is tier 2. So the first thing you must do is you must define your customer. You must understand their buying power, you must understand their interest, and then you must understand where they go to get their referrals. And then you go into that space And because of your familiarity with the audience, you're able to design products, design campaigns, design connection points with them. So then when you've designed those connection points, a critical thing you must have in that ecosystem is transformation stories. So if I'm trying to lose weight, you need to be telling me how you have helped people lose a significant amount of weight. And then even let's look at the weight loss category. How a 20 or 30-year-old loses weight isn't how a 40-year-old loses weight, isn't how a perimenopausal or menopausal woman loses weight. So if I'm perimenopausal, I'm looking for stories of other perimenopausal women you've helped. So don't just talk about general weight loss. The transformation story needs to be relevant to me. All right? So then the other thing that we can pick up is a compelling origin story, especially when you're forming B2B connections, business to business connections. So I'm coming to sell you a service. Why did I start that? How has it been useful to others? But my starting story can be a very strong place. All right. And then the use of testimonials, the use of case studies. I met a lady who says to me that she's a designer and she has um, a case study for every project she's run. She's been in the business for 30 years. So please understand how many case studies she has. So she can talk to a budget customer with reference to a case study. She can talk to a luxury high-end customer with reference to a case study because she's built it knowing that that is what her end user, her strategic partner was looking for. So you have to intimately understand them like they're your friend, because these are your friends. And then in that intimacy, you know who they are, how much they're willing to spend, where they hang out, what's important to them, what problem are they trying to solve. And then bring them stories they can relate to because of the familiarity and the connection to them. And then use also things like case studies, testimonials, even showcases behind the scenes. Let them come into your space and see how it works. Because at the end of the day, not all customers are equal, and therefore you must also ensure that you meet each of them at their point of need. If you have multiple customer segments like we do at AMC, the strategy for connecting to B2C is different from the B2B strategy. So you have to think about all these things and then align. The elements remain the same, but how you deploy them is what changes.
I am trying to summarize what you have just told us is profound. Transformational stories need you to understand your target audience, what their pain point is, what their buying power is, then show them the value that you're creating for them and go for them where they go. Perception will either drive up your price or drive down your price. And in all this, taking into account your friend, is she your friend or your customer, the one who's been in this business for 30 years?
Associate.
Associate. That means you have to document your experiences and document your activities and your stories. When it is time to remove the case studies, you remove it like a MasterCard or a Visa card. Then you swipe, and then the story generates. Thank you very much, Chisubere, for that. We must understand who our customers are in order to be able to link our brand perception and pricing power. And something that you said earlier on, you must be known for something and you have to be patient to grow. You won't just appear like a shooting star and you've had an impact. No. Transformational stories can have an impact on your business growth. Wait, what is your parting shot? Parting shot, not shots. You know, if I tell you parting shot, you can continue. No. What's that one thing you want us to take away from this conversation today?
Stand that we all start somewhere. So if you're not telling your story like you want to tell it already, that's fine. Because you're starting, it's a starting line, right? One of the biggest things you find is that people are very hard on themselves. They're like, oh, but I should be better. I should have reached here. And we often just start with what we know, right? We start with where we are and what we know, and we proceed from there. So if your storytelling has not been compelling to date, that's fine. But what are you doing about that? And that's what I always ask myself. What am I doing about that? Because you understand, Joe, that we are always iterating what we're doing. So the question is, where are we now? And where do we want to go? And how do we get there? So start where you are and just chart the path.
Thank you very much, Tesubire. Start where you are and chart the path. Our amazing viewers, this has been the 360-degree brand story, where brands come alive one brushstroke at a time. Every second and fourth Wednesday of the month, we get to listen to the one and only undisputed communication champion, storyteller, brand strategist, strategy executionist, the one and only Chesibire Talitwala Craig. Ladies and gentlemen, understand your value. Live it, share it. Your transformation is waiting for you to start where you are and chart your path. You can join us on our social spaces and you can send us a message. If there's anything you would like us to discuss, and most importantly, subscribe to our channel. Subscribe. There are very many insights. There are communities forming and formed, and there's knowledge flowing here. Have a good evening. Have a good morning. Have a good afternoon. Kwaheri. Ciao. Au revoir. Until we meet again, next episode. Keep it locked here on the 360-degree brand story, hosted by Akiko Stories. Thank you.